right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. I am absolutely thrilled that you are here. If you've never checked out the program before, we are primarily an interview and a commentary podcast. You can find the Billy Dees Podcast pretty much anywhere podcasts are found, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our friends over at Good Pods, and a lot of other places. And you can find me on Twitter at Billy Dees. And that's an interesting segue because what we are going to talk about today is, in fact, Twitter. And if you are maybe a casual social media person, and even if this story doesn't necessarily grab your attention, just because of Twitter in and of and by itself, I do feel that the story has some pretty big ramifications all the way around in terms of what's going on in society right now and what's going on with the media. We are live today, by the way, and if we are able, and we have some people who want to come forward and give their opinion, I might very well bring some people up. I've been a Twitter user. I'll say I was an early adopter. I wasn't like one of the first, but as soon as that platform started to take off and take root, I was certainly one of those people that were in the initial batch. I've been on the platform now over 12 years. And it's been an interesting journey. I first got involved with Twitter when I was doing blogging. I had a fairly popular blog at the time. And I was also working as an editorialist for a number of other blogs. There is absolutely no question whatsoever that Twitter drove readers to the posts. I have no doubt about that. There's ways you can track that. And besides that, it was very obvious. A lot of the times I was contacted and people would specifically mention that they found the post or they found me on Twitter. And there's a reason for this. Twitter is very real time. It is very topical, and it is very trending. When you hear something in the news and they say, well, this topic is trending, a lot of times that's observing what's happening on Twitter. And just simple things like, let's say, a presidential debate. You know, when I first started way back in the day and there was a big presidential debate, you would have to tune into your favorite radio station in the morning. And, the DJs and all the morning zoos, as they were called, that was a thing that was going around back in the late 80s. Early 1990s, the morning zoo. You had a bunch of people that were, trying to fire up their listeners and getting ready for the day. And people would call in and they would talk about the presidential debate that happened the night before. Now, this was not a scientific poll or anything like that, and neither is Twitter. But nonetheless, I find it, to me, it's fascinating that you can watch a presidential debate or some other major news story unfold, and in the palm of your hand, you get instant feedback. You get instant reactions from people who are taking in the information for the first time, just like you are. And that's one of the things that I believe Twitter does better than all the others. Certainly far better than LinkedIn. It's days before something catches fire on LinkedIn after it's happened. And Facebook isn't real time enough, in my opinion. And Instagram, I haven't had much success there, but I can tell you that even with that, it doesn't work like Twitter does for real time live events. And as the years went on, I've always been a multimedia specialist. I've worked for myself as I do now, and I've also worked for other people as I do now. I work for an organization. I've always been involved in professional audio. So in my early days as a blogger, in my early days on Twitter, as the years went on, what happened was around 2012, I believe, was a pivotal year for podcasting because you had a number of very significant things. There were a number of especially those crime podcasts that got national attention and actually affected the outcomes of some legal proceedings. And then you had very, very high-ranking political figures and other newsmakers granting interviews to podcasts. And this was something that in years prior to that just didn't happen that often. Okay, maybe here and there, but nothing to any great degree. And you also had the evolution of mobile devices happening very quickly. You know, podcasting, the legend is, I don't know, it's a legend, but it comes from the word iPod and broadcast, because in the early days of podcasting, people didn't have phones with high-speed internet on them. So they would download the podcast and listen to it, and hence the term, podcast. Well, getting north of 2012, by then, internet access and phones is starting to become more and more common. And smartphones are getting more and more sophisticated. And it's getting to the point where you don't even have to download a podcast or anything like that. You can stream it. The connection is good enough that if you have Spotify or any of these other services, you can stream right into your phone. So getting past 2012, podcasting is really taking off. And for me anyway, it seemed like a natural fit. Because of my background in audio and all these other things, it seemed like, hey, this is, the editorializing kind of went to the podcasting form. And here again, I got to say that Twitter is built for podcasting. I heard a statistic the other day that 40% of Twitter users are, podcast listeners. It's a great place to find new podcasts. It's a great way to just search out your favorite programs. So the marriage between Twitter and podcasting for me has worked very much. And here again, everything that I talked about with blogging, the live aspect of it, the news aspect of it, the trending topics, anything that podcasts want to cover, that stuff is on Twitter. And recently, just like with Wisdom and Clubhouse and some of these other things, Twitter has adopted Twitter Spaces, which is, here again, an audio-only forum where you can have a speaker, a host, and a number of people listening to it. And this has become very popular. And the future of this is unknown at this time with what's happening at Twitter right now. And that's not to be negative. That's not to say I'm hinting that they're going to get rid of it. I just simply do not know what the priorities are going to be with Twitter right now in terms of the features and so on and so forth. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But anyway, the one thing that I've noticed over the years, in the last 12 years since I've been blogging, podcasting now, and on Twitter, is that there's been a change in society. And that's been reflected on social media. Now, you can get into the argument, is social media reflecting what's already happening in society, or is social media causing some of the things that are happening in society? In 2016, after 2016, there was, to me anyway, a very distinct polarization in society and on social media. The kind of one of those things where you're either for me or you're against me. And this made its way into social media. Certainly by the time 2018-19 rolled around, the election of 2020, and with the pandemic and all of these other things, there was a people were taking sides. You're either for me or you're against me. It was very much present in our society, and it was very much present online. And how much you can blame the platforms, is anyone's guess. There's a lot of people who claim that certain voices are silenced, and that's probably true. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But as far as the polarization, everybody chases ratings now when it comes to the news and social media. So what you have is, as the news networks, especially the 24-hour ones, are competing for listeners, competing for viewers, they have to make sure that those viewers stay engaged. And sometimes the cold, hard truth, quite frankly, is kind of boring. Okay. So you have to spice it up a little bit. And this whole idea of news you can use really bothers me, because what that really says is news that you like. news that you agree with. Okay, so you have an increasingly polarized society, and you have a certain people online who are going by clicks. How many clicks can I get? How many people do I have to get to like me to have more followers? And unfortunately, the news organizations are pretty much doing the same thing. They're following the same model, except with ratings. We don't want to, present this particular story in a certain way because our viewers won't like it. They will perceive it as too conservative. They will perceive it as too liberal and so on. So they have to make sure that the people that are viewing them stay. So they present it in a way that's palatable to their audience. Now, this has kind of backfired, I've noticed, in the past couple of years, because what has happened is people trust the media less. Now, every poll says that, the media has been trusted less and less. And I would argue that we, the people, we, the audience, are as much to blame for that as the media outlets are. Because if we, by our follows and by our ratings, followed organizations that really did give objective truths and clearly separated commentary from the facts. It's one thing to have a news organization that says, here is what happened, A, B, and C. And now this is our opinion as to why that happened, but it doesn't happen like that. The facts, as it were, given by somebody like Walter Cronkite, and the editorialization, the bloviating, and all these other things, the lines between those things are increasingly blurry. Okay. And it's all a matter of keeping those ratings coming in, or in the case of social media, keeping those clicks coming in. So Twitter now is kind of in the mix on this. It's front and center because one of the key things, I'm going to talk a little bit about Elon Musk here, as to the condition of Twitter as it stands. There's very little doubt that he overpaid for this. He even says he overpaid for this platform. And we're going to talk about why he did here in just a second. But he has said that one of the reasons why he has done it is the free speech aspect of this. Now, in all honesty, and I'm sure everybody knows this, free speech has very little to do with most of the things that people say it does in everyday life. And that probably is true of Twitter as well. However, here's the sticking point. Free speech, as it's defined by the government, has to do with Congress and legislators not impeding the free speech of the people. Okay. And in most of the time when people are talking about free speech, that this aspect is not part of the discussion, but people just feel that free speech is a shield that you can use to go out into public and say anything you wish. And that is not true. However, here's the caveat to this when it comes to social media. As Elon said, Twitter has become the de facto town hall. And I've heard, a lot of people that criticize this say, well, a town hall has a moderator. When you have a town hall meeting, you have people with different opinions come in, they give their opinions, and it's moderated. Okay. And Twitter and other social media platforms are not that. Well, that is true. However, here's the problem. People don't go to town hall meetings. Okay. And I know that because it's common knowledge, first of all, and also here locally in Ohio, I've gone to a few of them. I've gone to some of the city council or neighborhood association meetings and things like that. And there's nobody there. I'm in a fairly populated area. There's thousands upon thousands of people in these districts. And maybe there's a dozen people there. And most of them are just barely know they're alive. And I know that's a terrible thing to say, but these people are just, they're out of it. So by default, these social media platforms, by their sheer size and their power, have become places where the free speech aspect of how we, manage information, they're becoming that. And you got to keep in mind, there's only a couple of them. I've had a couple people tell me, well, do you really want a billionaire like Musk controlling a very powerful platform like Twitter? Well, there's nothing new about this. Zuckerberg, with Facebook and most of the other, no matter what kind of technology we're talking about here, the ones we use every day, how we do searches and everything else, there's only a few people that actually manage that technology. And in some cases, some of the same companies own several of them. Okay, so what we're dealing with here is very much a problem where you have these very large technical companies who are managed by very few people, managing the conversations of millions of people. And I don't know that our laws and the way that we consider these things has really caught up with what is happening. Sometimes those changes are happening too rapidly for us to catch up to a good way to manage them. All right. So now you have somebody who, for the most part, in comparison with the politics of some of these other organizations, is certainly independent. And some people might say conservative, but he's definitely different. I actually happen to be a fan of Elon Musk. And that's neither here nor there. I believe my analysis of what's going to happen with Twitter here is going to be fairly objective. But, here again, that's my opinion. You might say otherwise. I happen to feel that type of person has a value in society. If you consider somebody like Henry Ford, Steve Jobs, even Bill Gates, all of these people, some of them weren't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but they not only made themselves an incredible amount of wealth, but they changed the structure of our society. We live in a different world because of Henry Ford. We live in a different world because of Steve Jobs. And what you have with Elon Musk, for better or for worse, he's pushing car technology, the way cars are sold. Ford and everybody is changing their models in terms of how things have been done for decades because of his changes. How we consider space and technology is changing because of Elon Musk. We could go down. So I believe his voice, his influence in this arena has value because, quite frankly, most of these other technical companies are basically software companies. They're data management companies. And I believe his voice has a value, whether you like it or not, him personally, because of the fact that he is going to bring a dynamic that is needed in terms of a reset for Twitter. And that's where I like the acquisition. He's doing a reset for Twitter. Now, what's he going to do? Of course, I have no idea. I have no idea what he's going to do with the company. There's been a few things here that have been thrown out there. For one thing, he does want to pull back some of the restrictions on what people can talk about. And now he did say that this does not mean, and I believe this is a quote, he does not want it to turn into a free-for-all hellscape where anything is said. Okay, he doesn't want that, but he doesn't want the tighter restrictions. And as much criticism as Zuckerberg has gotten with Facebook and some of the others, I kind of have to side with them because, especially when it comes to politics, who's the arbiter of truth? Right now, I'm sure all of us going into the midterm elections, we all have local ads playing on our stations where, one candidate is presenting the other one as the Antichrist. Okay, this person is going to ruin everything if he's elected. And they list a whole bunch of things that this person voted for and against. And the fact of the matter is there was a term used a while back that came under a lot of criticism called alternative facts. And everybody kind of scoffed at that. What's alternative facts? Well, there's an old saying, okay, in that figures don't lie, but liars figure. And we could take a given 10 facts, inarguably correct 10 facts, okay? And you could take 7 of them, and I could take a different 7 and we both could skew our positions in totally opposite directions. So when you start getting into stuff like that, how does someone decide, well, this is true in this case, but it's not true in this case? Who's the arbiter of that? And this is where I really feel that we're putting a lot of pressure on this is one time I'll defend news organizations and I'll defend the people who run social media. There's only so much you can do to filter out what might be called as an absolute truth. If you've ever taken a philosophy class, you'll know that what we might call an absolute truth is very elusive. It's very hard to do that, especially when you have very complex political issues going on in a very diverse society. There's only so much you can do to say this is true and this is not. And this is where we have to trust ourselves. This is where we have to change the way, like I alluded to earlier, and the way that we take in information. We shouldn't be following people that just reinforce what we already believe. We should be following people that challenge our positions. And we should be doing research. We should be looking into some of the raw data and deciding for ourselves, what does this really indicate? What are some of the nuances in which some of this data was retrieved? What year was it? What part of the country was it? You know, these are all things that make a big difference. You know, a lot of the per capita things that were done about populations gauging how contagious COVID was really didn't indicate that, you know, you can have the same amount of people in a certain area, but, you know, they're out in a state where it's mostly country. And then you go to another state where that population is in one city and there's 15 people in an elevator. Okay. So these are things that you have to consider about the information that you are getting. And we have to be better. We have to be better as users of social media. We have to be better as viewers of the news to be more responsible in how we take in this information, who we're taking it from. You know, I have nothing against Sean Hannity. I have nothing against Rachel Maddow, but I know exactly when a news story comes out, I know exactly what both of their positions is going to be. I may not know their exact talking points or how they get there, but I know what their position is going to be. They both rarely surprise me. Okay. So with that being said, if you're staying in one of those bubbles all the time, you're getting the same information presented to you all the time. And one of the dangers of that is that when you hear a given truth a number of different times, and I say a given truth, not the absolute truth, but you hear a given truth a number of different times, what happens is you start to believe it. Okay. And we have to be very careful of that. We have to understand that we need to process all the information, let all of those sticking points come to us, and then we evaluate it ourselves. And that's going to be a hard thing to teach people because people like to be told what they already believe. Who doesn't? When you're 5 years old, you want to be reassured that there's a Santa Claus. Okay. And it's very easy to fall into that trap as an adult, to follow the news sources that tell you what you want to hear. So that's one of the things that Elon is going to do, apparently, is, you know, give a wider voice for people to come on and not be restricted. The other thing, and I think this is very important, is the management of the bots. Now, the bots was an issue. He almost backed out of this deal because of the prevalence of bots on the platform. And that is something that I can't imagine there isn't a technological answer for. Okay. There's got to be a way to control some of the bots that are on the platform. So that's a wonderful thing. I'm pretty sure we all can agree on that. Who wants more bots, right? What do you need that for? It's also been floated that he might lean on a model in terms of revenue that is more reliant on the users. And this could come in the form of subscriptions. Now, a lot of people say flat out, if I have to pay for Twitter, I'm gone. I'm out of there. I am not one of those people. I actually subscribe to Twitter Blue now, and I enjoy it. It's only a couple bucks a month, but I subscribe to Twitter Blue now. And one of the things that I'm sure we've all heard the cliche that if you're using a given product and you're not paying to use that product, you are the product. I'm sure we've all heard that, right? So paying to use a service actually gives you some influence. It gives you some rights as a consumer in terms of the service you are getting. Okay. When you use something for free, anything that's free is worth exactly what you pay for it in terms of service. So I am not totally against the idea of a very popular service like Twitter being subscription driven. And plus two, this gets rid of a lot of the fake oddball accounts because obviously you have to enter payment information in and other things. So it really counts. I suppose you could make the argument that the overall numbers of users could drop if you have to pay to use it. But on the other hand, the people that are paying to use it want to be there. They really want to be there. So, and they more than likely are, like I said, the fake accounts will become less prevalent. That's not to say you couldn't have a fake account, but the idea that some of these people are just opening one account after the other and they're managing 15 accounts just to harass people, that's going to be more difficult to do when you have to go through some sort of a mechanism, whether it be a cell phone number and a payment system. That's going to be much more difficult for the average, ding dong who doesn't have a life and wants to create trouble on social media. So I don't necessarily have a problem with changing the model to be more oriented towards users paying to use it in some way. Now, here again, there might be a free version. There might be a paid version. We don't know. But obviously, when things actually change and there's something to critique, that's when I would hold my final judgment. But in theory, I don't necessarily have a problem with Twitter becoming something that you subscribe to in some way, in some fashion. Now, you got to keep in mind, too, getting back to Facebook, in that the old model of how these social platforms has worked is starting to erode a little bit. Getting back to and giving up being a free thing. Are you the product when you use a product and don't pay for it? The idea that you as a user are a target of advertising and that's what drives the platform. Maybe that model is starting to get a little old. Because right now with Facebook, for example, the value of Meta is falling. Okay. And I know that this Meta thing was kind of like a rebranding for what Facebook did. They're getting involved with, other different types of technology, other different types of social media. But it's the model that's been used for Facebook now for a long time is going to have to change even more. And recently, you may have noticed the way some of the pages work, some of the accounts work, some of the profiles, the way they interact on the app and the way they interact on the desktop is starting to change. And I can almost guarantee you that there's changes coming because they have to do something. So with that being said, why did Elon pay for this and buy this behemoth at $44 million or whatever, $44 billion, excuse me. And that's a big difference. That's 44 billion with a B. Okay. That's a lot of money. I mean, that's a lot of money even for Elon Musk. So was it worth it? I know a lot of the critics say that he was crazy to pay that amount of money for it because it simply is not worth it. That's probably true. There's an old axiom in economics, and that something has a value that's equal to what somebody else is willing to pay for it. So if he paid that for it, when all is said and done, that's what it's worth to him. And that's a big thing because there's more nuance here. Because typically when you evaluate these things, you say, well, is there a user base that's worth $45 billion? Probably not. Is there advertising revenue that's worth $44 billion? Probably not. Is the technology that governs Twitter, is it worth $44 billion? Well, certainly not to him. This is a guy that has companies that land rockets in a vertical position. They can probably handle Twitter very easily. So is it worth $44 billion to them? Is there some technology that's associated with it? No. So the answer is no to all these different things. The answer is no. It's not worth it in any of those regards. So why did he do it? Well, This is my opinion. This is strictly my opinion. Now, it's based on some things that I've read and researched, but I believe that there's a lot of truth to this. For one thing, Tesla, SpaceX, and the Boring Company and some of these other things essentially do not have advertising budgets. Okay. Tesla, as far as I know, is the most valuable American car company, and it has no advertising budget. You know, you're watching football, you're watching the Kansas City Chiefs or whatever, and you don't see all these fancy ads for Tesla this and Tesla that. You just don't. It's not there. So what in essence he has done, being one of the, obviously having these huge car company, a company like SpaceX, all these advanced companies, is he's given himself a pipeline directly into the marketplace to present his products the way he wants to. Okay. And I can't believe that didn't occur to him. And it didn't occur to the people around him when they were considering this. Because that is very, very powerful. That is very powerful. The other thing is that in terms of his image, okay, I know that he has been a hero to nerds like myself for a long time. He's been a hero to nerds for a long time. But now, okay, there is a certain celebrity aspect to Twitter because of the fact that everybody is familiar with it. The big stars are on it. When something happens in, the Academy Awards or on, everybody, like I said, following the trending topics, everybody's on Twitter. Okay. So now he is not only one of the most successful business people on the planet, but he is also becoming a pop culture icon. And that has a separate value that is separate from what kind of banking you have or what kind of products you're making. Steve Jobs, for example, he created a character, for lack of a better term, as to who he was and what he meant to that company. He was like this, marketing guru type person that cared about the customer and wanted technology to serve us and all these other things. And he became a pop culture icon as much as he was the CEO of Apple. And this Twitter acquisition gives Elon Musk that. And the other thing, this is a big one. One of the things that people that like Henry Ford and other people, one of the things that they always took a lot of pride in was their ability to influence politics. Was their ability to interact with the government. And I don't know how much this acquisition right now is going to have on the midterms, which is only a couple of weeks away. But in the coming months, depending on what happens with Twitter, the potential for him to become a very powerful influence in politics by 2024 is very real. Okay. And this is something that's very important because it could impact the way things are done in government that impact his other businesses. How people view electric cars, how people, these are all very, very important things. So if these people that I've listened to here recently over the past couple of days are staying in this little slot that, well, Twitter isn't worth $44 billion because of the technology or because of the user base or any of those things. It's a very narrow view. It isn't like somebody like me. Of course, I could never imagine having that much money, but it isn't like somebody like me just barely squeaked out enough dimes and nickels to buy it. Okay, what would I do with it? Would it be worth $44 billion to me? Probably not. But somebody like him, somebody who's got so many other things going on, the way he is impacting not only the economy, but impacting society and how we live. Now, all of a sudden, you have this very powerful megaphone that has a lot more value that you can't necessarily measure in terms of economics. So I kind of believe that we are going down a path now with Elon that is going to be very interesting. You have somebody at the helm of a very large social media technological giant who is out of the mold of what those people usually bring, not only to business, but to politics. And I believe a shakeup was in order. Whether it's good or bad is ultimately going to be up with what time will tell. But anyway, that's kind of my take on what's going on with Twitter right now. I actually, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm kind of excited about this. This has got me kind of excited. I'm very anxious for the coming weeks and months to go by and really get a feel for how this is going to play out. I'll go ahead and remind you that you can follow me on Twitter. I'm real easy to find on Twitter at Billy Dees. And, you can tweet me anytime, follow me, what have you. And always, like I always say, just be nice. That's really all I ask. Just go ahead and be nice, because that's what it's all about. That's really what we have to learn as users of social media is we have to be civil. We can't rely on someone to police us. Okay, we have to be civil. We have to be truthful with our opinions and the facts we present. And in good faith, participate on these platforms for the betterment of everyone. And sometimes being right isn't always the best thing. Sometimes listening to someone else and getting their perspective and understanding how they feel has a value beyond being right. And that's something that we as users have to take into account. Well, anyway, that is my little speech on Twitter. Thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate your kind attention. You can find the Billy Dees Podcast pretty much anywhere podcasts are found, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and with friends over at Good Pods. And you can follow me at Twitter at Billy Dees. Thank you very much for listening, and have a great day. I'm Billy Dees and host of the self-titled podcast, The Billy Dees Podcast. We are primarily an interview and a commentary-based podcast featuring authors and creators talking about their craft, advocates for community issues, and myself and an array of co-hosts discussing current events. There's no partisan ranting and raving going on here, just great content. You can find the Billy Dees Podcast on your favorite platform and on Twitter at Billy Dees. Thank you, and I hope you listen in.